Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with Ken Weber. Yes, the Ken Weber of Maximum Entertainment and Maximum Entertainment 2.0. Ken is known in Magic for his director's notes and his advice for performing magicians. That means everything, what to say, what not to say, how to move, how not to move, how to come on stage, how to get off stage, so many different thoughts like that. And he gives commentary and helps some of the best magicians around with their shows, notes like that, and so many more. I sat down with him in this episode to talk about common mistakes magicians are making, what you can do to help make your performances better, and just talking about magic right now. You know, Ken lives a life doing something completely outside of magic. He's in the world of finance, so it was lovely to sit down with him and talk magic, and we had a blast. I learned a lot. It was a pleasure, and I think you are going to learn a lot too. Here it is, a wonderful time with the one and only Ken Weber. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with the one and only Ken Weber. How are you?
Are you sure I'm the one and only?
Maybe there's more. I was on Google. There are a few more, but there's only one and only Magic Ken Weber for now. You are the first Weber that came into my life. And, you know, I always like to talk about this. There are only a few monumental theory books in the world of magic. And I think people spoke very positively about it, and it kind of welcomed me into the world of theory. And the reason why this podcast exists, the discussion of theory, the why instead of the how, it exists in part because of books like this. So to come full circle, I'm incredibly grateful to be sitting here and chatting with you because you're the one who made me sit here and chat with people in the first place. So thank you for your work. And now that we're there, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into magic?
All right. Well, that's actually related in the book. And it's very funny we're having this conversation now. I actually went to a home for asthmatic children when I was 10, lived there for 2 years in Denver, Colorado. At age 11, I was walking around the streets of Denver. A guy stopped me in front of a store. I was looking at a weird kind of store, gags, puppets. Hey, kid, you like magic? Yeah, sure, I like magic, the 11-year-old said, me. Well, come back here. We have a magic show next week. Well, I went back, and it was a teen magic club. And between that and seeing a live magician at the junior high school that I was going to, that put me in. And by the time I came home to Denver, from Denver to New York at age 12 and a half, I shortly thereafter got a business card, Magic for all occasions, Ken Weber.
For all occasions. That is awesome. A wonderful story to the way into the world of magic. Obviously, no surprise. It's not uncommon. Magic shop, a trick, a person, something like that brings us into it. I am really interested in the journey because I think that anybody who makes their way into some sort of paid or professional magic, whether it's in an amateur sense or a part-time sense or in a full-time sense, there's a kind of journey to make it there, whether it's an emotional or whether it has to do with the way your life moves and turns to go there. So talk to us about what brought you to start actually performing paid magic shows.
Yeah, well, I did, a lot of birthday parties as a teenager. My father would actually drive me to the gigs. I guess late teens, I saw a mentalist. One of our fellow teens did a memory routine. And I said, oh man, that's different than anything else. And I became a mentalist shortly thereafter, so that by the time I was in college, I was a mentalist. And when I graduated from graduate school, in theater, by the way, I couldn't get a job. It was like, hey, I'm pretty smart. I have 2 college degrees and some good honors, and I had been hosting my own television show back then. But then I couldn't get a job, and an agent offered me a cruise for 2 weeks. So I said, oh, I could do that. And that was it. Never looked back. And so for about 17 years, I was a full-time hypnotist mentalist and traveled all across America and a good chunk of Canada and cruises and things like that.
It's so crazy that, and I've been thinking about it a lot recently, especially in the wake of the pandemic and so many people thinking about job security and things like that. I also experienced that I went to school, I got a university degree, and I left, and I was so much more employable as a magician than as the fancy mathematics degree that I went to go get.
I had 2 hobbies growing up. One was magic. The other one was sort of Wall Street investing. That was also a hobby. After a good number of years of flying around, making some very good money, I must say I was one of the highest paid acts on the college circuit. I used to read a lot about investing. In the late 1980s, I started a newsletter to help investors not get screwed by stockbrokers. I thought it would be a hobby just for fun, help people out, do a good deed. It just kept growing and growing. And then people said, why don't you manage this money instead of me following the newsletter? And I said, hey, my newsletter's easy. Just, no, Ken, you do it. Well, that turned into Weber Asset Management, which now manages hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, the reason I brought this up early is because of what you just said. I tell my investment clients, I've always said you have to have a rainy day fund. 3 months, 4 months of your living expenses. Now that we know a pandemic is possible, we're telling clients 6 to 12 months of living expenses has to be socked away. And Jonah, you got to know how many of the people in our world of magic and entertainment do not have that. They get money in and then they go buy another trick or they go to another convention without having that rainy day fund locked away. And now we know more than ever, you got to do that. You really got to do that.
One of the biggest lessons that I've been talking about from day one of this podcast, and it was one of the reasons why I fell in love with theory books, was this idea of stop spending money on tricks. Stop spending money on tricks. There are few things that will slow down your growth as an entertainer so much as to regularly spend your paychecks on new tricks. It just means you're not working on the old routines. It just means you're throwing so I certainly echo some of the stuff that you're talking about in terms of how really some of the most important tools as a professional magician is to think about pricing and entrepreneurship and money managing and all of this different stuff, because one lesson that magicians learn over and over and over again, especially when maybe moving up to the next stage or the next level, is about pricing and saying, okay, I can do 4 250 gigs or $1,000 gig. And then, okay, I can do one $4,000 gig or maybe 3 or 4 $1,000. I don't know. And that idea, really now it's important to think about money management, long-time money management. So that's actually a really relevant thing for the full-time magician.
There's a lot of mistakes that young performers make, and they think show business, the show part is more important than the business part of it. The old cliche is business is the longer word. You got to take care of the business side of it, both in terms of how you spend money on your act and how you spend money in your life. So I can help people with investing, but you got to know that there will always be new shiny objects out there to attract your attention. By the time you become a semi-pro or pro performer, you have enough tools. You have enough. I mean, I was never immune to it either, but one of the irony is that when you're a professional, magic is no longer a hobby, and you stop buying stuff. You stop going to conventions. I stopped buying stuff, but that forced me to polish what I had. The first time you do something, it is whatever it is, good, bad, or terrible. By the 10th time, hopefully you've polished it, and by the 100th time, it's down pat. Hopefully you continue to improve, but you can't just keep trying new material out over and over. You'll kill yourself.
What are some either sticking points or really important thoughts in the world of your professional magic that helped you unlock high-paying gigs and lots of universities and great clients? What are some of those sticking points or things that you think maybe you did differently?
I can't say that I have a pat answer, but I will tell you, for example, I spent a lot of time thinking about marketing. I used to take classes in advertising. Believe it or not, this will show how old I am. I was the first New York magician, mentalist, hypnotist to have a full color brochure. And I went to a guy who worked at Ogilvy and Mather, which is one of the world's biggest advertising agencies. I got him to help me with the copywriting, and then I got one of his graphic designers, and I spent the bucks. Now, your friends who are listening don't even know what a brochure is, but that's all we had. You would send out to the agent or to a client a brochure that would tell who you are, what you do, a few pictures, a few endorsements, testimonials. But I had some of the best. I mean, I really hired the top people.
Do you think that made a big difference?
Well, it made a huge difference. I mean, I also had a good act. Now you guys are going to spend your money on your videos, but it's the same concept. I mean, I've seen some very good videos that are homemade because you can learn the basics of it. But I tend to think for most people, you're better off hiring a professional, not only because he or she will have the tools, but also he or she will come at it dispassionately. We see it through our own eyes and say, no, you got to point out how when I pull the coins out of the air, it doesn't flash, or something that's irrelevant to the end user. The professional doesn't care about that. He or she cares about how it looks, how it feels as a video.
Mm-hmm. And I think obviously there's a micro lesson there about what things we should do ourselves in our businesses and what things we should hire out and outsource, which is always something that we constantly have to think about. I think every year and every few years, we kind of have to look and say, like, is this part of my business that I currently do something that I should still do? Or maybe I should find someone more talented, or maybe I should hire out this part. What kind of working with teams or working with other people, aside from hiring a good graphic designer, was there anything that you were doing of managers, agents, any kind of lead collecting or anything like that wasn't just you rolling up your sleeves?
When you're in the middle of building up your career, it seems like a slog. It seems like an uphill battle. It seems like there's so much competition. And once I got there to where I got to the point, Jonah, where I stopped advertising. I didn't need to anymore. I mean, I just had enough repeat dates and the agents all knew me. So all my brochures are out of date, but I just didn't have any new ones. When you're in the middle of it, I got to tell you, don't give up. I mean, have a sense of, I need this, I want this, I can do this. Every day at the end of the day, whether that's dinner time or later, I have to say, I did this to move my career forward. It's very easy when you're, say, a professional and you're in between gigs to just chill out or just have fun. But no, you're like the shark who has to keep swimming forward. You've got to keep moving forward because there's 15 guys or women out there who are as good as you or better. There's more competition. You guys have more competition than we had back then because people can learn magic, they think, through videos and YouTube and so on. So every day, here's what I'm doing today to move my career forward. I'm working on my advertising. I'm working on my marketing. I'm working on developing that new routine. I'm working on my scripting. Let's talk for a moment. We'll get around to the directing and the scripting. But, writing your scripts down, I'll tell people who rebel against that why you should do it. Every day.
It's got to be one of the three, or you're saying all of the three.
Every day you got to say at the end of the day, here's what I did specifically to move my career forward. Never have a day when you're a professional where you just sat back and chilled and spent, you binged Netflix or whatever else you're going to watch.
I am with you. You cannot watch TV for 4 hours in the middle of the day every day and be a growing professional. It's just not feasible. I don't know, unless somebody knows something I don't.
At the very least, you want to work on routines, start polishing current routines, start thinking about the new routines. Just don't end a day without saying, here's the 2 or 3 things that I did that I know helped move my career forward.
It's easy to think that a professional magician is the X gigs per month. But a professional magician is all the time in between, those gigs. In addition to those gigs, those are work, but they're very fun. It's kind of the whole point, but it's all of the negative space in between those that decides which magicians are the top talent and which magicians are, or maybe the most booked, and which magicians are not.
Yeah. I mean, the better magicians, the better performers tend to be a bit obsessive. Now, there's 2 kinds of obsessive. There's productive, and then there's destructive. Destructive is, I need another new shiny object. I'm going to go to another magic meeting. I'm going to go to another magic convention. I'm going to hang out at the store.
And also, I want to add another one to that, which is a really, really common one, is let me work on the act some more. Which is lovely, great for your act to be better, but if no one's buying it and nobody sees it, you do not need to spend more money working on your act. You need people to see it before you work more on your act.
I'm not going to give you a full qualified yes, unqualified yes on that, because you do have to work on your act.
Of course.
So there's ways to work on the act, but I hear what you're saying. There's truth to that. You can't spin your wheels.
What do you think for growing magicians today is the best use of their time, specifically in terms of business? What is the best use of their time to maybe do videos, to maybe do marketing?
And you just said the magic word. It may not be the answer you're looking for in terms of business, but it helps ultimately, which is video, which is to look at yourself. I know a couple of performers. I know several. Bill Cook from Chicago has mentioned this to me. Because I say in my book how you really need to video your performance. And it's very difficult. I hate looking at myself. Most people do. Bill Cook, at least when I talked to him about this a couple of years ago, said he videos and then watches every single one of his performances. I think that's a bit much, but you really do. But it seems to work for him. He's doing a lot of work. You really learn more from watching yourself on a regular basis than you can ever learn by going to another magic shop or even talking to your buddies at a magic club. Because if you're smart, you can start to see the flaws. You can see the weak spots. You can see where you start to lose your audience, or you forgot that you said an ad lib, and oh yes, I got to write that down so I have that ready next time. I think the idea that it's video now costs nothing. In my day, it was a big deal. For you guys, you just put it on a little tripod in the back of the room, and boom, you've got a video.
For sure. And I'll say for me, the biggest growth I've had is rewatching and rewatching and rewatching clips. And I will actually disagree with what you said and say, go record everyone, just because it's a good habit. If you can't watch everyone, okay, so be it.
I'm saying it might be a little obsessive, but if you have that discipline, good.
Let's talk a little bit more about bettering of the show and bettering of the performance. And one thing that I liked about this book was that so many magic books are different, and they're talking about the details of maybe the theory of maybe the trick. When do you tell the joke, before or after? When do you do the moment? When's the tension? When's the release? This was theater notes, director notes. And what I find is that when I am talking to magicians about their act and about their performance, more than 50% of the things that I talk about are staging, lighting, positioning, getting up volunteers, things to make it aesthetically pleasing, to make it smooth. So it's surprising that there aren't so many books and works in the world of magic in terms of theater and in terms of staging. I think it's still spotty. There's still only a few of that. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I don't know why it is, but I can tell you when I wrote the original Maximum Entertainment, which is now something like 16 years ago. 2002, I think it came out. Yeah. So it's like 18 years ago. There really weren't any books quite like what I wrote, because there are theory books. I won't mention the names just out there, but they weren't written by high-level, successful performers in the magic mentalism world. They weren't. So my book has not a single trick in it, but it's many pages of real-world director's notes. Once I decided to write the book, I spent, as I say, about 2 years really watching a lot of performers in a disciplined way. It is a theory book in some sense, but I really tried to make it truly practical. It's not based on here's what I think. It's here's what I've seen over and over. I don't go to magic clubs to watch meetings. I only watch professionals perform.
What an interesting little point there at the end, which is we're talking about the professionals performing for real people, real live, real human audiences who've been doing it for years, not testing out or trying out of a trick at a local magic club.
I'm not, patting myself on the back just to do it. I have literally hundreds of professionals who say they travel with the book or they've read the book 5 times, like that. So I know it has been helpful to professionals, names I'm very proud of that. I had no idea how it would be received because, as you know, Jonah, I name names. I was only known in the world of mentalism and the people who are out on the circuit, the college circuit and the high-level corporate circuit. I went to a magic convention to sell the book when it came out, to just be there. So I named names because I said, well, I don't know these people anyway. I won't be vicious. I'll just say, here's what I saw and here's how I think it could be better. Some of those same people came and thanked me.
Well, I think there's many, many people who have lots of thanks to you to helping their act. This idea of a director for your show. This idea of more than one person working on your show is obviously not new, but it's certainly something that in the last 5 and 10 years, this idea of magic consultants and a team of people producing a one-man show and, all of this stuff is becoming maybe more popular or more in people's heads or more. And I think, half of the best lines, moments, ideas, bits, jokes, tricks, things from my show came from other people's commentary. And I think half is probably giving me too much credit for the other half. So talk to me a little bit about why someone should really consider a director, and maybe more specifically, a team approach, a multiple person approach or multiple eyes towards putting together an act.
I've never really thought about it multiple, but it's very interesting what you said about 5 or 10 years. I think that's exactly right. So when I wrote the book, it was subtitled Director's Notes for Magicians and Mentalists. There was nothing like it. And I don't know, my book has sold thousands of copies. So maybe the book was an impetus to getting people to be directors. Yeah, now there's quite a few who now are out there saying, I am a consultant or I'm a director. I think you really want to stick with one person. It's serial monogamy. You want to have a director, follow that person's lead. And then if you disagree or tire, or he or she moves to the other coast or something like that, then you can move to something else. But otherwise you might get conflicting, sort of the Magic Club syndrome where, they all attack you and say, here's what you did wrong. I think you want one vision of someone you trust. So I think that's important. In the new 2.0, I quote other people now. I quote Darren Brown about Darren Brown is at the peak of, certainly in the UK, of the entertainment world. He never mounts his show without Andy Nyman. For a while, he had tried 1 or 2 other people, but working hand in hand as a director. Because, and I have a quote from him, you'll never see yourself the way another person sees you. So someone you trust, someone with experience, can remove those rough edges that you won't see in yourself even.
And it almost echoes what you said about hiring someone to do video for you, which is that all these things that we think are the most important because our ego and all that other stuff gets in the way, a director with really truly the audience's best interest in mind and at heart can make sure that those parts aren't, belabored in the show.
The only part, by the way, when I direct, I keep everything confidential. I don't even say that I worked with anybody. The only person that I say who I worked with, only because he wrote about it in Magic Magazine, is Joshua J. I worked with him for months on his, he did a one-man show at Magic Live, and he did it 7 times in one day and got 7 standing ovations. I will take, 0.5% credit for that. It was all his material. Josh is the one who said Ken Weber is a polisher. So I don't write material. I don't come up with new tricks. I'm a guy who says, do this, don't do that, or stop saying this, or stop walking that way, or we can't see your face when you do your punchline, or whatever I'm saying. But Ken Weber is a polisher. So every director has his or her strengths. Mine is to take a pretty good act already and make it better.
Already you shared that the book was kind of built on the same ideas coming up over and over again, that almost, here, let me write it in a book so that, it's all in the same place. I don't have to say it again. Obviously, that made the book grow larger and larger. But still to this day, do you see any looming or any remaining classic errors or maybe giant rocks that magicians are still doing for you to say, if you just handle these big 3 or something more or less like that, so that obviously not everyone can work with you, but what can people start just right now, throw at their act or throw at their magic to make it 1% better?
I will probably give a different answer in 2 months, and I had a different one 2 months ago. It's buried in Maximum Entertainment 2.0. It's buried in the sense that it's in the section, there's a new section in the new version on music, an expanded music section, how to use music properly. And I talk about how we hear so many of the same bits of music. For a long time, the theme from 2001, or the theme for Rocky, or the Jeopardy theme, or, if you go to conventions, you start to hear I heard that already. Well, there's an ocean load of music out there. And so I buried in that section, if you hear a piece of music, don't use that piece of music. If you hear any person use that music, don't. Well, I'm upset with myself that I buried it because it shouldn't be that. It should apply to virtually everything in magic, but especially lines. My strength is dealing with performers who talk. I'm not like Joni Spina, the late great director, who dealt with movement and dance and so-called silent acts who worked in music. I'm as I was as a performer, a speaker, as a guy who talks and kibitzes with the audience. If I hear Jonah Babbins say a line that's clever, I must never use that line. Just don't use that line, because it takes away your creativity. It doesn't, by saying that, by having that discipline, you force yourself to say, how can I get that same joke without saying those same words? And it will make you a stronger performer. Plus, going back to what we're saying about the show business side of it, the business side of it, at some point, hopefully you'll be dealing with agents or bookers or, people from cruises or whatever venue you want to work. They will have seen other performers. If they see the same tricks or if they hear some of the same lines, even the same phrases, if they have even a subconscious sense that I know this, I've seen this, I've heard this, that does not help you. It hurts you. So if you hear a line, even if whether it's funny or it's just the direction or it's when it comes to revealing the card, and now for the first time, everybody says that. Don't say that. Say, we've never seen that card before, or you haven't shown that card to anyone. I don't know what the card is. Does anybody else know? Let's see what that card was. Everybody says, and now for the first time, show us what the card was. Don't say when I did Magic Live, I did a lecture for them called Raise Your Level for the main stage. And I named the imaginary guy who makes the mistakes, Biff. I had a whole running gag about Biff. I said, and don't do what Biff does. Because if they see Biff and they see you a year later, even if it was your line first, hurt that, you can't deal with it. You can't help that. But certainly if intentionally that Biff said that, you can't be saying that. And as a magician, there's an infinite number of routines that you can do. Try and come up with new stuff. Yeah, classics are great. Linking rings are fun. But unless you can do it like Chris Capehart or some of the other real masters,
right,
I think you should make your own classics.
Certainly, I think that one big lesson that I've learned in magic is that magic is not treated the way that, let's say, stand-up comedy is treated in terms of theft and borrowing and creativity. But in many ways, the more that we as individuals choose to treat it that way, that I need to come up with my lines that I come up with, and they're unique to me. And the more that I can do to a trick to make it more and more mine and unique and different and something that is not being seen and is not being done is really important. And I think maybe that's lost a little bit because of the way that magic is, buy a trick, do the trick that you bought, and you can go perform on stages with this trick that you bought.
Well, we have a real handicap in the magic world. In the world of comedy, you really can't go to a comedy shop on Tuesday.
They don't sell jokes.
Well, they sort of do, but most people don't do that anymore. In the old days, they did. But we have that for better and worse. The fact that I can go to Tannen's tomorrow, pick up something that in theory doesn't require a lot of manual dexterity, and perform it on my show, 3 days later. No other performing art does that. But we think, I understand how the gimmick works. I understand the setup of the deck. I understand how to execute the trick. I will now go and share it with the world. You've accomplished 10% of what you need to accomplish by knowing how to do the trick. 90% you have not accomplished. And that's the failure of the world of magic. It's fine if you're an amateur magician who enjoys hanging out with the boys and the girls now at the Magic Club. But if you want to get paid learning how to do the trick is simply not enough.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I wanted to touch on again is what you said about using the same lines. And I think that when people hear the same lines, their initial instinct is to think about some of those funny, not funny comedic lines, which is over here, no, your other hand, the clean one, or the trapdoor, or whatever. But I think one of the aspects that you bring to the attention in the book, which is something that has always clicked with me, are the joke lines that we're still seeing. You know, one example that rings in my head, and I don't know if it's in the current book or not, I don't know, but one example is, let's take this a step further. I have heard so many magicians take things steps that I don't even know what it means anymore. And if you have other examples, like, you know, there's the joke examples, but you've got some of them that are more or less the same idea as let's take it a step further.
The new book has expanded. That was one of those popular sections of things not to say. So I had a bunch in the original, and then version 2.0, there's a lot more, including a whole section on words and phrases mentalists have to stop using. Because back in my day, nobody knew what a mentalist was. Now every magician is a magician mentalist.
Also a mentalist, yeah.
Yeah, or so they think. But anyway, I write about that. So there's a lot more of those cliche phrases that people aren't even aware of that we need to stop saying.
Mm-hmm. You keep saying about magicians who are, let's say you learn a trick and you say you're a magician or you say you're ready. You keep saying, or so they think. Do you have a requirement, a level that says, oh, now you're a professional. Oh, now anything like that in your head?
I would say there is one easy benchmark, and that is, are you getting return gigs?
Right.
If you're getting repeat gigs, you know you have pleased people. If people are willing to pay you and then pay you again a year later, or to pass your name along to friends or relatives or other college administrators, if that is happening, now you can say, I think I'm making a dent here.
I want to talk a little bit about scripting, because I think that there is a raging debate all about whether you need to script or you don't need to script, because I think that in the end, I have a script. So that is to say, through the combination of iterations and writing and doing and trying and testing and adding and whatever, I have a script. But certainly I struggle to sit with a piece of paper and write. My scripts are built through a little bit of live, a little bit of writing, a little bit of this and that. And then eventually I'm saying the exact same words, doing the exact same actions over and over again. And I have found that magicians are in more or less one of two boats. It is either I write the script and that's the script I say, obviously it edits and grows, or once upon a time it was more or less improv, but now I'm saying the exact same words over and over and over again. Whether I've written it down or not at this point, I don't know. What's your thoughts on those two things? Do you think writing is the way, the other one is not? What's your feeling on that?
Well, I was in the camp of improv. I'm a pretty funny guy on stage. You wouldn't know it from this interview, but believe it or not, I'm a pretty funny guy on stage. And so I was very much a non-scripter until I wasn't. And I started writing I don't know what prompted me, but when I started writing things down, it forced me to say, do I really need to say that? Or does that make sense? Or didn't I just say something similar? Here's the thing about scripts. You don't write a script word for word and then go out and recite that script. You want, first of all, you young kids, you young whippersnappers, again, not only do you have a video camera in your pants pocket, you also have a dictation device. You know, most people your age don't know how easy it is to dictate, and it transcribes. And it's like 95% accurate once you learn how to do it properly. So it's not tedious. You know, you can just say your script and boom, it's all there. And that's an amazing tool for you. In the beginning, you want to have a loose script. I think I started off that section on scripting by saying the Nike ad, you know, just do it. You put together a script of key lines, key points, key instructions that you need your spectator to follow to make sure that you've said you're going to say it clearly. Man, I've seen so many, especially my fellow mentalists, screw up directions, and you can't do so. By scripting it, you can look at it and say, is that clear? And then when a person screws up on stage, you go back to your script and say, how did I screw that up? You screwed it up. She didn't screw it up. You screwed it up. And you go back to your script and say, what wasn't clear? Maybe I needed to repeat that. Anyway, but having the script, that's your base, that's your building block. And you do not become a slave to the script. Those of us who feel facile on our feet in front of a microphone, if we're comfortable, we will ad lib, we will say things, we will react to what's happening around us. And if it's good, we add it to our script. If we can remember it, hopefully we do. But by having a script, you have a home base. You have the foundation. I very much understand the reluctance to it. But I say do it and learn how to do it properly.
I think one thing that you said there that really clicks with me, and I find right now I'm doing a lot of virtual magic teaching, and I find this is a really good tip for beginners, but it's something that you just said, which is instead of worrying about the whole entire script first, take those bumpy moments, those moments of instruction or clarity, or moments that you really, really, really need to make sure that your brain is not trying to do something while saying a word, while doing that. Make sure that those are second nature. Those are the real juicy, important moments that need to be clear and perfect. The other parts will slowly take form, whether it's some writing you do or coming from work on stage. And I really, really like that because it makes it a little bit less daunting to...
That's a great tip. Let me just touch on something that's not in the original version, that's in version 2.0, which is, I think it's subtitled Start Naked. Meaning, I used to say, write your script out and then go out and do your script. Now I say, write only the barest, and when you first perform a new trick, do it as simplified a way as possible, so that you, Jonah, you have a new trick and you have an idea, because every trick we do is like a play, a little playlet. It's got a beginning, a middle, and end, and so you have an idea. This is how I'm going to frame my trick, and then you go out and it doesn't play to the audience. The audience doesn't react the way you hoped they would. And now you have a dilemma of, is it the script that failed or was it the trick that failed? And you don't know for sure. So if you go out and you start naked by just having as bare bones a presentation as possible, sort of a dealer demo or even less, then you have a concept of, it's the trick that is not strong. If the trick is strong, now you start to build up your playlet around the routine.
Part of it, it's about like testing one variable at a time, worrying about one thing at a time.
There's your math training.
Yeah, there you go. I wanted to change gears a little bit and talk about comedy. I know that, you said you're very funny on stage, and obviously we're not cracking any jokes. There's certainly a section in the book about comedy. And just like we talked about so many magicians thinking that to buy a trick and then go on stage is to be a magician, many people think to be a comedy magician is to tell a joke or to do a silly looking thing. Obviously, it is an entirely different beast. So without getting all the way into comedy magic, let's say people that are just trying to add a little bit of humor to their magic on stage, just to give it a little bit more stuff, a little bit more going on. How can somebody start experimenting with humor without cracking open an old joke book or any one of these weird things that might not move them forward?
I talk about there's two ways to do comedy and magic. One is to tell a joke, something funny, say something funny, or have comedy that is organic to the routine. And the second is far more desirable, so that when the woman opens her hand up and there's 5 sponge balls instead of 2, that's funny. And then if you can build on that. So for most performers, you want to start without canned gags. You start with the routine. It goes back to what we were just saying about Start Naked. You start with the routine, and once you have the routine down, the mechanics of the trick down, then you throw in a line or two that you think might work. And you videotaped it, as we talked about earlier. And was your timing right? Did you get to the punchline at the right moment? The key for comedy magic, because there's nothing worse than watching somebody try to be funny and not being funny. It's agony for the performer. It's worse for the audience. Have strong magic if you're a magician. Have strong mentalism if you're a mentalist, whatever you are. And then you start to layer on incrementally things that you think will be funny. Do not walk out on day one with the new routine, having 15 canned jokes ready to go. Unless you have been in a comedy club, you've grown up in the comedy clubs and you really feel confident in your ability to make people laugh. Don't be doing that. Don't sit down and write a bunch of gags and come out and do them. Do it incrementally.
That is such a good lesson. I feel like all of my tricks go from magic to comedy magic over the course of 6 months to a year, because I start with the trick and instructions and important keys, and then there's a joke, and then there's another joke, and there's another joke, and then by the time that it's a routine that I'm proud of, there is laughter every minute from a combination of gags, actual jokes, like verbal jokes or moments or anything like that in between.
And if you're working on a comedy routine, you write them all down. We talked about earlier, every day you got to move your career forward. So you write down everything that you think is funny, and then that's what you draw upon to start putting one or two in per show. And by the way, having been a professional for many, many years, I know comedy is delicate. Mm-hmm. What works 10 times can flop the 11th time. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't work the first time, but you still think it's funny, try it the second and third time.
And also one idea that you said about trying new jokes in your show, I have found that ability to be modular and say, oh, tonight I'm going to try this thing. Oh, this seems like the audience and I can use this joke and this. You have to know your show in such a way of backwards and forwards with scripting and with knowledge to even be able to hypothesize, hey, you know what? Tonight at the end of this thing, I will try this joke, just because you have such a firm understanding of the arc that people go through.
Yep. Yeah. And again, if you have confidence in your act and you know that if it doesn't work, 15 seconds later, you're onto something else that is a regular part of your show. Boom. You don't worry about it. You just keep moving forward.
I want to talk a little bit about discovery and the discovery process in performing. Because one thing that we've touched on and one thing that is easy to see is that, like you said, start naked. What you get up there doing is not the same as what you end up doing weeks, months, years later of growing and learning on stage. So half of performing is performing, but the other half is being out in the real environment where it happens and discovering and learning. Do you have any advice for how to discover, learn, how to be open to the growth and change of your act over time?
Well, it's still the video,
Right.
Again, in the book, there's a section towards the end of what to do before a show, what to do during a show, and then even what to do after the show. And one of the things I want you to do after a show is to turn off the radio or whatever, the podcast.
Radio. Yeah, turn off the radio. Buy a radio, then turn it off.
Okay, now you're just annoying me, all right? So, yeah, I could do 5 minutes about that, but I won't. You want to turn on some sort of recording device, hopefully, again, that magic thing in your pocket that can record your voice, because you'll remember as you're driving home what worked and what didn't work, and that ad lib that you threw out, or that funny line that somebody threw out at you, or that thing that didn't work. The fresher you can get your thoughts recorded, either recorded straight or recorded via dictation feature, you want to get that down. That's going to help you a lot. That's gold. The stuff that you can remember and record right after a live performance is invaluable. You cannot let that fritter away.
So we've spoken about the well before, so the preparation phases, the writing, a little bit of that. We've spoken about the during, how to be in the moment, how to capitalize on what people are saying. We've spoken about the after, how to take advantage of all those moments. But one thing that we haven't spoken about yet is the just before. Just before we step on stage is an important moment, because that's when we do some final things, not only getting ourselves excited and psyched up, but also worrying about things like makeup and everything like that. Can you talk about some of the keys before you step on stage? Not weeks before, months before, but hours before.
Yeah, well, or even minutes before, even seconds before. I had some of that in the book. There's a little section called Before the Show. And I talk about simple things like just do some basic stretching. Even in your good clothes, just without disturbing your outfit, just stand up straight. I tend to slouch. Many of us do as we get older. Stand up against a wall. Make sure my posture is as straight as I can make it, because that's how you look better walking out. You want to have some water nearby. You want to make sure that you look at yourself in the mirror after you've stretched. Is your fly the way it's supposed to be? Yeah, and I think what you don't want to do is to worry about your props at that point. You want to make you have a checklist. Everything is already set. So the thing that I do just before I walk on, like within the 30 seconds of being introduced, if there's anybody backstage, I say something mildly funny to them. Like, it doesn't even have to really be funny, just something to put a smile on my own face. Because that's how I want to greet my audience, as a friendly person.
Just getting you in the mood, in the right mood. And
so, if just anybody backstage, I just will say something like, are they drunk or is it just me? Is it cold in here? Or is it, just whatever I can to get myself to feel funny and happy and friendly in those seconds before I'm introduced.
It's like loose, funny, like natural, just getting those.
Got to get rid of whatever happened in your day out of your life. Nobody cares. You may recall that's a theme in the book. They don't care. They don't care about us. They don't care about your problems. They don't care about what hurts. They don't care about your allergies. They don't care about the awards you won. They don't care about anything. They care about themselves, and you got to be their friend. Whatever your character is on stage, we have to relate to it, and it has to be a friendly, at least in the beginning. We have to feel that we're going to spend some time with a guy we like.
We've spoken a little bit about, your journey in helping magicians with their magic. And I know now you're kind of not really in the world of magic so much anymore. So thank you for obviously taking a little step back into it a little bit to house or come be a part of this interview and give us some amazing.
Touch on that I mentioned before we started about your colleague up there. And
yes, Jackie Swan. Do you want to talk about it?
It just illustrated, I was telling you before, that it illustrated to me the conundrum that every director has, because I watched her at a magic convention do a routine of cutting to the aces. And that's how she announced it. And she cuts them and does flourishes, and it's a 3 of spades. Then give me a chance. And she cuts it again. It's the 7 of diamonds. And then she does, and I feel sorry for her. What's going on? And she cuts to 4 in different cards. And, oh man, I don't know. And then she spreads the deck out, and she said something like, you wouldn't think I would have had a better chance. And she spreads the deck out, and it's nothing but aces, the entire deck. And I thought about that routine quite a bit, because I said, how would I direct that? Because my director self there's no off switch. For better or worse, I can't turn it off as I watch performers. I'm always directing now, because I'm the guy who wrote the book on directing magicians. So I'm watching her, and, I feel bad, and I don't want to have that feeling of feeling bad. And I said, and think about it afterwards, it's a great trick. And it took me by surprise, and I laughed, as did the people there, but we were all magic people. I said, I've got to see that once or twice in front of a lay audience. And that was a lesson to me, how no director, no performer knows for sure how anything will play. So I didn't ask Jackie how well that plays for lay audiences. I have a feeling it does work. One of the tenets of the book is control every moment. That's one of the 6 pillars of entertainment, control every moment. And she wasn't, it seemed like. In retrospect, of course, she was. And so is the payoff, the punchline, worth the feeling of unease? I think it might be. But it was a supreme example to me of, no matter how much I know, no matter how much I study, and this applies to any director, we don't know for sure. That's why Broadway shows go out of town. They go to Toronto and Calgary and Boston, or they get to Broadway. Because you can have the most experienced director in the world who's won all the Tonys, but until it's in front of a live audience, you don't know. And even when that director is sitting with in the dark in Boston, he or she is still taking notes.
Mm-hmm. One thing there that I think maybe sticks out, which I think is very interesting, is that obviously no one director has all the answers. And kind of touching on what you said earlier, there's a certain amount of preference, and obviously you want to listen to one voice so you're not getting scrambled images in your head. I was thinking a little bit about the core principles in the book, and then I was thinking about directing. And I think that there's a difference between the bad to good and the good to great. I think the bad to good is not a matter of opinion. I think the good to great is, I think talking about the minutia of, maybe this part, maybe this should be a little bit longer, or this should be, that's a matter of preference and artistic design and choice. But there are so many core boulders, let's call them, in this book, some that we touched on and so many that we didn't, that are kind of the bad to good boulders that I think that magicians need to address before they address the good to great ones.
Yeah, the book is useful to people who are, it's not really for beginners. They're welcome to read it, but it's for sort of moderate or middle level performers up to top pros. Again, I've had top pros say they read it, once a year, because you're right. That's an astute observation. The bad to good, there's basic mistakes that we all make starting off. So yeah, I can help you with that, but I want to really take you from good to great. The initial title of the book was Raise Your Level. That was the working title of the book. Then it became Maximum Entertainment, but Raise Your Level means, and it's too bad we're not on video, but if you're here, I want you to take you here. And I raised my hand to show you. But if you're up at the top, you can still get higher. I attended, and in the 2.0, I talk about attending a lecture by David Copperfield, and he talks about working through every act still to this day, and he calls it glorious torture. To this day, they're still refining. So if Copperfield and Chris Kenner and those guys, and that team can work on it, and Darren and Andy, Darren Brown and Andy Nyman, they never stop polishing. So that's where you go from good to great to Copperfield and Darren Brown level.
Before we get to the wrap-up questions, we have a few questions we ask every guest. I have one more question about directing. And it is that, like we said before, I think there's been this specificity of people in magic now where there's magicians, but there's also more of these jobs like directors and choreographers and, all this different stuff. And I think that there are people that are listening to this podcast that are not the magician. They might be a director, an advisor, a helper, a creator of some sort that is advising the magician. And I think that that's phenomenal in so many ways. And I'd love to know, instead of advice for the magician, do you have any advice for the director, the helper, that they should know, modern magical directors, what they should know to help them give direction and be of great use?
That is a tough question. That's a tough question. I thought you were going to start, and I'll just say that in the new version of Maximum Entertainment 2.0, there's a whole section on how to give directors notes, whole checklist of how to do it properly. Equally importantly, how to receive directors' notes. People, that's never been written up, and I gave that at Magic Live, and that was very well received. Yeah, that is a tough question. If you're acting as what you're talking about, a director who's got a background in magic, because if they don't, I've heard horror stories. I know the people who are doing the illusionists and the big shows. They talk about the problems they have dealing with non-magical directors, and it is an issue. Very often they're great, but then they'll say, "No, you got to turn when we do this," but I can't turn. The bird is over here. So working with a non-magical director it can be a challenge, but you got to give them a chance. And if, first of all, you're either hired and then there's a director like the illusionists, or you pick somebody. If it's your choice, once you make the decision to pay Ken Weber or Jonah or whoever you're going to, once you make that decision to work with that person, you have to commit. You can offer your suggestions, but you have to truly, working with Joshua Jay was easy. I would sometimes stop him every 15, 20 seconds. Stop right there. You're holding it wrong. And he, as one of the top professionals in the industry, never pushed back. He listened, and he either explained why he can't do that or why, yeah, that makes sense. So if you commit to having a person on your team, listen to what they say to you. Don't, it's one of the things about how to receive director's notes. Don't argue. You may not agree, but on the spot, you do not argue. You listen, and then a day or two later, or 3 days later, you come back and you either accept it or explain why it didn't make sense for you.
I think that is phenomenal. And I think with that, we are nearing the end of the episode where we have wrap-up questions, the same questions that we ask every magician on the podcast. The first is the endless chain. In order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be perfect for the podcast. Who do you think would be a phenomenal voice for magicians to hear right now?
You're throwing this at me?
Sure. Right? Yes.
Listen, my friend, I have not had lights here in New York for 7 nights, 7 days and nights. I am cranky. I am tired. My voice is leaving me. I will get back to you. You should do Harrison Greenbaum.
Already did it, but I won't keep bugging you for it. Okay. I'll let you get some rest, and you can send me a message about who would be the best. The next question is about modern magic. In 2020, we've seen so much change in terms of magic. What's one thing you like about modern magic or 2020 magic, and one thing you don't like about magic in 2020?
Oh my God, no! I need heads up on these things. There's a lot of things I like. I go to the magic conventions now. Listen. The level of magic and commitment to perfection or perfecting, it's a never-ending process, is astonishing in a certain small segment of the world, the magic world. And it's gratifying to see the ingenuity and the skill levels. And what's really pissing me off is some of the kids are 12 who are doing, and they're doing phenomenal stuff. So that's fantastic. What pisses me off is some of the advertising in magic. Every damn trick is the greatest trick ever. It's sold that way, and it's $9.95 for an instant download. And many of them are just tweaks on stuff that is in Tarbell or something, so that. And what really pisses me off is when they show you a trick they want you to buy, and they've edited it in such a way that you can't see something that you would see if you saw it magic counter in a shop. So that definitely pisses me and 99% of the magic world off.
Mm-hmm. That's a great one. The last question is the take-home point. People have been hearing us talk about magic for a while now. If there's one thing from our conversation for magicians to take home with them to be the most important thing, the thing to remember, the thing to keep with them close to their heart when they think back to this episode, what should that one thing be?
You're killing me. I'm going to give 2.
Good.
Don't give me a hard time.
You can do 2.
I'm going to do it, one for professionals and one for non-professionals. So for the non-professionals who are either hobbyists, dedicated hobbyists, or wannabe professionals, is what we said early on. Every day, what did I do today to move my career forward? Did I do marketing stuff? Did I learn a new routine? Did I perfect a new routine? Did I tape something and then look at it carefully? Every day, you got to say, what did I do today to move my career forward? For the professionals, this is my life as an investment advisor that you know about. I used to tell people that they need to have a 3-month rainy day fund. Well, now that we know there is such a thing as a pandemic, I want all my professional friends in show business to strive to have 6 to 12 months of living expenses socked away in a bank account. I'm all about investing for the future, but these things can happen. Not only a pandemic, but you can, literally break a leg. Not the expression, but literally break a leg where you can't go out and work. So you've got to have that rainy day fund, and you have to build it up ASAP, as soon as possible, because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Those are 2 wicked practical pieces of advice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With that, where can people find you, and where can people find the book Maximum Entertainment 2.0?
Maximum Entertainment 2.0 is in every major magic dealer, and there's a website. You can't order it from me, but you can learn about the book, max-ent.info.
Perfect. Well, we will have a URL below so you can go and check that out and learn more. Ken, thank you so much for doing this wonderful interview. What other people don't know is we're actually connected through my uncle and a trip years ago and all this great fun stuff. So it was fun to connect through, it was meant to be, from me reading the book to you meeting my uncle to all this great stuff. So thank you so much for joining me. This was really, really wonderful. And of course, a big thank you to everybody at home who joined, listened, learned a thing or two, and is going to put it into action. Thank you all so much. I'll see you next Thursday. Well, there you go. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. I always recommend this book, Maximum Entertainment and Maximum Entertainment 2.0. One or the other, I guess I recommend 2.0 now because it's the new updated version. But I know in terms of magic books, it stands alone on its kind of what it is about and how it helps your magic become better. And when you read through it, you kind of find yourself going, oh, wow, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, wow, I do that. And it's amazing. So if you learned a lot in this episode, you'll learn a lot in the book. Oh, and before you go, one more thing. I've been secretly working on a project for the last few months. It's an online 1-day 8-bit virtual magic convention. I'm going to tell you a lot more about it soon, but if you want to learn more right now, there's a sneak preview video up at unconventional.fun. And if you're thinking, wow, Jonah's being kind of cryptic, well, then you might want to go to unconventional.fun. See you guys next Thursday. Peace.